Welcome back. So tonight's security podcast, our topic is going to be security devices and do they make your network insecure? And we got a couple of guests tonight. We wanted to keep it relevant. So we have Rob Whiteside, Redefine Solutions. He's our resident network wireless expert.
Hey,
and We've also got Jeff Day, Better Days Technology. All right, so the topic today is going to be, when we put these security devices in, can we do it in a way that compromises our system? I mean, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is make this business, organization, whoever it is you're doing the work for, more secure. So can you get in there, do a job, and actually mess that goal up and make something insecure, right? So in today's age, all of our devices, I would say at this point, are plugged into the network, right? They've got network, they've got WAN connection. I mean, the days where we had the isolated system sitting in a room where one guy has to walk down to the basement, sit at this specific workstation just to, administer the system or view footage. Those days are, I think there's still a few people that still operate like that, but those days are numbered, right? Mm-hmm. So all of our new systems, we're talking about watching them from home if there's surveillance. We're talking about popping doors open with our cell phone. So we're putting them on the network and we're opening them up to the internet, right? And in most cases, that's what we're doing. So can we compromise our network? Can we compromise ourselves to, an internet threat? Absolutely. I mean, that's why I wanted to have this discussion with people and just try to give some insight into, where are you vulnerable, what you can do to help with that vulnerability. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that, us as a community, security integrators, IT people, whatever kind of tech knowledge you're into, that we do it right. We do it right and we give our clients the best. We give them what they need. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. That's why we brought, I got two experts here that are big in technology, big in IT. So, and they have backgrounds that to prove it. And that's really where I wanted to go with this discussion is, getting into, first off, right? Can your security devices make your network vulnerable, right? And Rob, if you want to jump in and start giving us what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, there's definitely opportunity for things to be vulnerable, right? I mean, you see a lot of people trying to be budget conscious, and they go buy these devices off of Amazon that are who knows what, who manufactures them, and they, it's a camera for $50. It's got to be a good deal. But it's some OEM manufacturer from China that there's no certification process or whatnot to this device, and it's essentially a botnet device to your plugging network. I mean, there's some Asian manufacturers that are great, make great products like Hanwha and other places like that. But there's also the low budget items. They're budget for a reason, right? Because it's really a botnet device to exploit networks. I've seen that quite a bit. Cheap cameras under $50 price point. It's that price point for a reason because it's vulnerable. It's already got botnet installed in it, whatnot, or it's got an exploit that can easily be exploited, and someone can gain access to your network. I mean, there's definitely concern. I mean, it's very much know your product you're installing, right? I mean, is there compliance on that product, reviews, audits, whatnot?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and that's something that people have to think about too, because every camera you plug in, every device you plug in, it's sitting on your network now. I know a few years ago, Hikvision had an infamous security breach on their side, right? And they allowed, certain cameras were talking out, they were passing traffic, they were doing a lot of things, and that kind of was, if I remember, it was the beginning of the end for them, right? As soon as that vulnerability was exposed, people got really scared of them. I mean, there's the people who went away from the Hikes and the Dahuas for, ethical reasons, and
Yeah.
then there's the people who got away from them because they feared that their technology was invasive, right?
Yes.
Things that they were doing, could have jeopardized your network. And in a time like today where companies are investing in cybersecurity insurance, that's the people getting hit by these cybersecurity threats are not just big banks and big organizations. They're little people. There are a lot of little people getting hit, and they're getting hit for 10, 15 grand. And some people say, "Oh, that's nothing." Well, for some
To them,
people, that's
it's a lot.
too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a small business that probably makes that much in every 2 weeks. That's going to hurt.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear it. And then a lot of problems, Hike Vision has their ethical issues for sure, and Dawa and stuff like that. Is the big problem too is Hike and Dawa, they OEM so many products to white label vendors. A lot of these products with the flaws were OEM vendors, like white label distributors, whatnot, that are selling products that are 2-3 years outdated. They have no updates. So when the security researchers are doing the audits, oh, it's a Hike Vision product, it's a Dawai product that has the exploit, and they might have released some updates, which I know they did release some updates to fix those problems, but there's so many white label manufacturers that sell their chipsets that it's just no one knows it's an ADI white box camera that's actually Hike. That's causing an exploit. It all goes back based on who owns the MAC address of that chipset, which is Hike Vision or Dawa or whatnot. So there was that from both sides too, right? Is they try to fix their own direct products, but there's also issues with white label vendors not patching their products.
That's a really good point too. The amount of Hike and Dawa out there,
Yes.
that's just it's massive, right? Because at a certain point in time, they were the cheapest you could get. So anybody who wanted to get into the business and start selling cameras and start turning profits, they were just smashing those.
Yes.
Just absolutely smashing Hike Vision.
Yep.
And it was a quick, cheap, easy way to get into the game, and a lot
Yeah.
of people cut their teeth on them. So in terms of what's out there, well, absolutely is a ton of them. And I would say, in my opinion and my experience, people upgrading firmware on cameras is rare.
Yes, agreed.
They put them up, they install them, they might upgrade the firmware when they're configuring them, and that's it. You walk away, it's over.
Yeah, most people, it has a lot of networking. People only update the firmware on the first install, and if there's an issue, that the manufacturer says, hey, update the firmware that fixes the problem. But if there's no problem, 99% of the people out there don't touch firmware ever again because they walk away. And a lot of people selling Hike Vision and Dawa unfortunately are the budget customers that don't want to pay for maintenance plans as well. So,
Yeah.
so these
Jeff,
people,
how have you seen it, Jeff?
Well, it's funny that we're talking about this today because on Sunday I went to go help out a customer. They had a camera that was down on the exterior of their building. And it really kind of got me thinking about the security of a network and how, they basically had an active RJ45 jack that was on the side of their building, and you could gain access to their network from where that camera was supposed to be. So, and the camera was down. So, you got a dangling RJ45 jack on the side of this building, and if you really wanted to do some damage, it was only 6 feet off the ground. You could climb up there with a laptop, and you're in this guy's network easily. So, we were talking about the hardware manufacturers and the vulnerability there, but I think what Rob's really going to be able to speak to today is preparing your network for vulnerability. And this particular network didn't seem to have a VLAN for his security hardware. So you're in. You were in this guy's world, just on the outside of his building,
Yeah, complete keys to the kingdom, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I have clients that have temporary needs for exterior network jacks. I can think of one client who, right off the bat, they have some outside events, and they need, so I do have a cable, a jack, right outside, like, in a box, open it up. And, I could disable that jack easily on the switch, but just to make sure, I physically remove it from the network and only plug it in for that event where they need, an extra access point. Or I'm thinking about, it's my museum client, so sometimes they run like, outdoor events where a vendor will come in and they need a network connection for like an online auction or something like that. So I know we're going a little bit off topic here, but it has to do with network security and having that network jack on the outside of a building. Not the best idea ever.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're gonna have it, don't rely on a VLAN that isolates that jack from your network. The only way to make sure it's not there is to unplug it at the switch. So that particular client, I just have, a note right on that network cable, like, unplug after use, or, something like that. I mean, I'm the only one there, but I want to be able to quickly find it and disconnect it from the network. It's the only way to be safe,
I mean, definitely a good call. I mean, there's different ways to approach it. I mean, VLANs are definitely a good approach always. I mean, even cameras inside of a building, I'll put on a separate VLAN. Like the most time they can only reach the NVR or VMS appliance, and then out to the internet for time. I'll restrict other access to the internet. So if it's a trusted vendor I know, I might let it open to update server to update firmware automatically. But it's a very restricted VLAN. It can't talk to other VLANs. It can't talk to other unknown sources. I only let it access to certain time servers. Because someone technically a bad player could have a vulnerable service running on the same port as NTP 123. That's not time server. So I lock it down to very specific lists of hosts that I can trust. And then there's the other side where you can actually do port security on. So I think the issue goes back to a lot of camera installers are budget conscious, they're trying to see how cheap they can install a system for, and they're installing it on managed TrendNet switch or TP-Link switch from ADI, the cheapest they get for $200 for a switch kind of thing. And it doesn't have the features like the managed switch would that provides options like MAC address filtering or whatnot. So you can log, if you have a camera outside on a light post that's accessible to someone with 6 or ladder, you can lock it down saying it can only talk to this MAC address and that's it. So if someone unplug that camera, plug in their laptop, they're not going anywhere. They're going to get blocked. So
right.
But it's very much a knowledge thing because a lot of camera installers, they have basic networking knowledge, but they don't have the knowledge of advanced networking of how do I limit attacks.
Yeah, and that's something that obviously, the I want to say the school for putting up cameras doesn't really teach advanced networking, right? The school of thought is get into it, IP it, change the settings, done, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a network engineer putting these things up. In most cases, you got to remember there's different size shops too, right? So
exactly.
Somebody who's running a massive shop, they might have network engineers on staff who plan all this stuff out. But then you got to think about it. Well, who's the client for this, right? The bigger clients want that kind of security, right? And that's what I've noticed, right? If I have a small business beauty salon, right? They're not paying for the network engineer to go through all the trouble of, all those details. And like you said, the budget for this job may be just an unmanaged switch, right? So then you're limiting yourself as well, right? Because now can you really put security on it with something like an unmanaged switch?
And I see how it comes from a lot because they'll go to unmanaged switch and whatnot. The customer's like, "Hey, can I put this on my network so I can access it remotely?" And most guys are like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." They plug a patch cable and they're done, and they don't realize the consequence of security by doing that.
Oh, even better. Let's talk about this, right? This is personally, this is phased out already. I haven't opened up a port forward in 2.5, 3 years, maybe. Right? So that's done. For Trican Security, we don't port forward. That's it. That's the rule. So all of the appliances we use, they better not need to open up a port, or else we're not touching them. But that was a very common practice.
Yes.
Very common practice, right? So, and I think people just don't understand how vulnerable you make yourself when you start opening up those ports, because you opened up the port and now your appliance is open. Well,
Yes.
guess what? Your appliance had access to the whole network if it's on an unmanaged switch, right? So it's kind of like that little hole that everybody squeezed through kind of deal.
If there's a vulnerability in that software, someone's getting into that device.
You're done. Your goose is cooked, right? I mean, yeah, you saved $150 probably going with the unmanaged switch, but at the same time, you just opened up a big hole, and the port forwarding was just, that was just pouring salt in the wound, right? You just made it easy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's times you do it, but it's restrictive. Like I have some clients with some legacy systems, access control and whatnot, and you need a port forward for something to work, but it's locked down by IP. It's locked down that only the CEO's home IP and maybe another office can access that one server, and that's it. And I tell them, if you want to do any more, we need to start deploying VPN for these people to access. And like, we don't want to do that. We'll just leave it how it is. I mean, it's very much mixed. I mean, all these vendors sell it as forward a port, you're done. It's simple, easy. But they don't realize the security consequences of this opening a whole network. And trying to explain to someone that forwarding a port but locking it down by IP is more still secure than this opening a port. And you gotta try to explain that to people. But then what you're saying, people not forwarding all these cloud P2P services, I mean, there's still technically a vulnerability, but it's a much lesser vulnerability because the service calls home. You have to log into that service to authenticate to it to be able to get back to the original service. I mean, there's still the slight exploit possibility there, but their chances gone down by quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think the reliability of these P2P services is if they get compromised, they're done, right?
Yes, exactly.
So they pour a lot more resources than the lady running the beauty salon is going to in terms of security.
Exactly.
Right.
And you really got to keep that in mind. It's like, okay, so we put this system up for you, and nobody's ever going to maintain it. We already said we're not updating anybody's firmware. We opened up a port, and now your stuff is open. So, depends on what kind of business you are. If you're a beauty salon, and you might not have equipment in there that's vulnerable, right? I mean, you might just have maybe an AP and that's it. But if you're a doctor or a lawyer's office or something like that with, protected sensitive information, you just did them a disservice. You just did a huge disservice installing that kind of architecture in there, right? So just something I think when we do these talks, right, the underlying theme is being a better tech, right? How do you elevate your game? How do you get better at what you're doing and get to that elite status, right? That's where we all want to be. We want to be some of the best at what we do. And the little things matter. Especially, I wanted to really focus on the network and the vulnerabilities. And Jeff jumped right into it. I mean, because, those are the things you think of, right? Exterior facing cameras, data jacks in common areas, data jacks externally. So Jeff touched on it, right? His approach is just yank that thing completely out. Now that could get, if you don't manage the network, then that could turn into an issue. If you manage the network, obviously, and or you have a guy on site. I mean, there's different layers to, it's like the mom and pop shop, that little beauty salon who wants, maybe a card swipe and some cameras, and then there's the full IT system where you walk into a place, they either have an MSP already or they got an in-house IT staff. Those are discussions you have to have with them right up front. And personally, when I walk in, I want to talk about what you have for IT, and you got to tell me who's maintaining it, right? Because every solution that I put out there is not for everybody. If you have a weak network, right, if it's always going down, something like PDK is going to be a nightmare to install, right? PDK, you lose the network, you lose the controllers, right? So that kind of thing, or even cameras, something like that. Depending on if I'm hopping on their equipment or am I staying on mine. Because you got to remember, right? A lot of times we bring the switches, right?
Yeah.
As the integrator, we bring the switches. And I try to coordinate with them. If I come in there and they say, hey, we're Meraki, I say, well, are you going to provide the Merakis? Because Meraki gets interesting because of the subscription model,
Yes.
right? Obviously, I tell them, get me more Merakis and I'll plug into them. Or something like if they have just maybe even Unify, right? I've gone in situations where I've put in the Unify, we acquired the Unify, and I just did a set in form and let it point to the MSP's servers, and the MSPs were happy to manage it. So it's a mix, right? And then there's the small situation where you come in directly, you're bringing the switch, you're bringing everything, and you're kind of like network engineering it on the fly. So it varies, right?
Yeah.
I've gone into installations where they're like, don't touch the switches, just know that they'll be there. Yeah. And we manage it. You don't even plug in. We get there, we rack it, we punch it down in the rack, and that's it. Usually I take a patch and I'll put the patch and I'll leave it hanging. I'm not technically allowed to plug the device into the switch. Like, that's how strict they get with it. They're like, don't plug a damn thing in here. Our guys will do that. And then they even had like Radius servers where I had to provide every MAC address for everything. And as soon as the device plugs in, they auto send it, I guess.
Authenticate.
And authenticate it, and then they just push it, and they say, this device belongs on the security VLAN. No matter what port it stuck itself into, it always goes to the security VLAN, and everybody else goes somewhere else. So, I mean, those are more of the sophisticated...
Yeah, like banks, healthcare. I've had a few clients like that where in healthcare or finance, their networks are locked down. You can't plug any new device in until the MAC address is registered. So you have one bad AP, one bad camera, you replace it. It should be a half an hour, 40 minutes to do it, but it's going to be 2 hours on site. So you got to talk to your network security team, saying, hey, here's the MAC address. Can you allow it? I want to make sure it works in your network before I leave. Next, at a 40-minute service call with a security conscious customer, it's now being 2 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah. But honestly, that's what it takes, right? I mean, I admire those shops because at the end of the day, those are the ones who are going to be they're going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
When that bad actor, slaps the camera down, puts up a ladder, and plugs in his MacBook, he ain't getting nowhere. He's stuck. And that's really what you want to do, because you got to remember, these devices are security devices, right? At the end of the day, they're not supposed to do the opposite for you.
Right.
They're not supposed to, switch and turn the tables on you. Because wouldn't it would really suck if you had a client and your device got taken down and all of a sudden somebody plugs in and boom, they got hacked. They're calling you, hey, I got a camera down, and then you start the investigation side of things, and lo and behold, their whole network is screwed. There's ransomware on it. And then they're looking at you like, are you a professional or are you a trunk slammer hack who's just doing this on the side? So you got to really keep it.
No, I agree.
I mean, and that's half the battle, is just being assumed that you're, better than the person who's got malice, right? I mean, that's the hardest part. And it's funny. Like I've done so much work in education, and I felt like as long as I could be smarter than an eighth grader, I didn't have to worry about a network getting taken down in an elementary school. But some of these kids, they just it's their goal to
Yeah.
just cause trouble. You know.
Well, it's like I helped you that with your one school customer. Kids were being kids and being malicious.
Yeah, just can happen. And same thing. And then those kids grow up to be the kids that are trying to take down a network on a at another place. And so yeah, it's definitely, you got to come at it with two different approaches, right? There's the physical approach, and then there's obviously the security approach on the network equipment that will make sure that this isn't an issue. But I mean, it's funny. Like I was talking to both of you guys about this recently, how our local internet service provider used to have a security and surveillance division, and they recently just shut it down. But before they did, I mean, they came in with their own separate modem, and it just ran parallel to the modem that you had for your network, and they were just like a total division.
Even though it was the same ISP, it was two separate networks.
Yeah, yep. And like, it was just a customers felt more reassured that their camera and alarm equipment wasn't on their operating network.
I mean, I've seen that too. A lot of times, some of this too is it's a separate modem, it's a separate connection, but it's not even a public connection. It's a private connection, trunked over coax or DSL or whatnot, just for their security devices. So if a customer is behind in their internet bill and gets cut off, their security system is still active because they've paid that bill, right? I mean, a lot of carriers, a lot of people diversify. It's one business, but it's really 10 businesses, and every business does their own method to transport that data back to their servers.
Yeah,
Right.
that's really interesting. I was in ADI Expo a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to the Qualsys guys, and they did a presentation on their they call it IQ Wi-Fi, right? So basically, it's a device. It's like, I guess it replaces your router, and what it does is it segments your network and reserves a little block of it for security devices. So I guess if you've installed some alarm systems in homes, there's a lot of like remote panels that are connected via Wi-Fi. Maybe some cameras connected via Wi-Fi. Just some of your devices in the home have Wi-Fi, right? And then it's not uncommon for maybe the home Wi-Fi to go down, or somebody needs to change a password, and then you got to redo all this stuff. So it insulated the security professional because it reserved that password for the security professional, but we didn't even need it. So it was kind of like almost a plug and play solution that one, it gave a guest, it gave the homeowners, and it gave security, and it segmented them off. So it did all the things we're talking about doing just as an out of the box solution. And I looked at it, and I thought my first thought was, oh no, who needs this? And then at the same time, as he kept talking about what it did and what it insulated you from, I was like, wow, wouldn't it be really nice to have had this on some of those? Because you get a call and it's like, none of my keypads are working. And I'm like, how's your Wi-Fi in the house? Oh, that's not working either. That's it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Got it.
I mean, I think it's a great product. I mean, I think it's geared towards entry level Resi installers. I mean, because a lot of stuff they do, like Unify can do separate SSIDs for separate devices, and a lot of us install Unify already as a approach to replace these low end all-in-one devices. So I mean, I think the Qualsys Wi-Fi has its place, but a lot of us are also doing networking as well. So we're probably installing something more sophisticated in these homes, like either Unify, Ruckus, Aruba Incidon, something like that. I mean, I've had a few Resi customers where I've installed Aruba Incidon because it was available in stock, the price point's right, and it does what we need to do.
Yeah.
And I know it's gonna. I know it's gonna run it. There's gonna be no issues with a cheap router dying or nowhere.
Right.
And that's the hardest part, I mean, as business owners, we get the call and they want to work with us and they got referred to us, and then you get in there and you start talking price, and they're like, hey, can't you do something cheaper? And it's like, I don't want to, because you're asking me to do this for you. This is the level of work that I need to do to feel
Yep.
good about this install. And sometimes you gotta be able to walk away and feel good about it and say, it just wasn't the right fit, because I wanted to do something that just was gonna cost them more money. And they're at their wine and cheese parties and they're hearing about someone who got a camera system installed for $900.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, I'm just not going to be that installer. And there's nothing. Well, I don't want to say there's nothing wrong with going with the other people. It's just you just got your expectations need to be in check, and it's tough. It's like that with anything. I mean, there's all in our industry. There's a good, better, best. Always.
Yes. Oh, I agree with you. I mean, I had a residential customer the other week give a quote for a building in Toronto, and they're kind of like, why is it X dollars per camera? I'm like, well, you have the camera, you have the labor, you have the Wave VMS license for the camera, the network to support it, whatnot. I mean, and I explained to the guys, this is what adds up. It's like, well, what happened to, like, before we were doing, like, we were used to do all-in-one VMS or MVR solutions, but we realized it wasn't meant for his business because he had product managers trying to do video, and it was a nightmare. And we started moving to Wave VMS. He liked the first one, so that was my standard going forward, because a lot of these buildings are 20-plus cameras, and they're 24/7 activity. Even he said to only motion record, there's always motion on all these cameras because they're 500-plus tenant buildings. And I'm sure you've seen that too, Beck. High population resi buildings. Even set the motion recording to motion based recording, you're still recording 24/7 because there's so much activity. Someone's always coming into the lobby. Someone's always coming into the parking garage. You need a better way to find video instead of scrubbing through video manually. And
Yeah.
I because I'm like, I kind of said there's a cheaper solution. I'm not really interested in selling it to you because all I'm going to hear is complaints from your property managers. And he kind of was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of hidden costs to it. I think the problem is, people, go to a big box store, they see a camera, and they're like, oh, this camera's set is only $900. Why are you charging me so much? And it's like,
Right.
Who's doing the cable? Who's crawling through the attic? Who's hanging the hooks? Who's crimping the ends? I mean, that stuff starts to add up.
Mm-hmm.
Who's doing the software license? Who's buying the server? Who's configuring it for you? And it's like, oh, okay. It's not as simple as people think. And
No.
It's almost laughable sometimes. I've had plenty of customers where, they wanted to go at their own, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they, put up an Arlo or a Nest or something like that. And they always call back.
Yeah.
Because it
And
doesn't
that's
meet your needs.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part. Is there's always an Arlo or a Nest
Mm-hmm.
that is like being compared to our work, and a camera's a camera. That I can see it on this. Like what's the difference? And it's like there is a difference, and then it's like I resent the fact that I have to start like being a salesman at that point. It's like just you're here. You've called me. Like I shouldn't have to go into like salesman mode here because I'm not. It doesn't matter to me if you get a Ring camera or you go with an enterprise solution, because I don't want to support that Ring camera. So like if you want to go with that, that's up to you. I just am not going to be the guy afterwards,
Mhm.
So, but that's the hardest part is because it's there, it's in big box stores, it's at, Best Buy, and they see it, and then they go and compare it to your price, and it's hard.
Yeah, it is, and that's I somebody told me this a long time ago. Don't be afraid to say no.
Yep.
And I think I do that a lot more than I used to. Like right now, if you call me and say, "Hey, I'll provide the cameras. I want you to install it,"
No.
you don't
No.
need me.
Yeah.
No, I've done it. I've done it sometimes. I've done it sometimes recently too. I've told people no. They're like, then they get offended. I'm like, it's not. I'm going to spend hours negotiating the price of you for a job that's going to be done in a half day. So
Yeah, I really won't do that for anything at this point. Like I want to, and it's not about getting a providing fee or any commercial. I just don't want to. I want to be in charge of the whole project. I really kind of try to shy away from even camera jobs that I'm not involved in the network setup. For this very reason, all the stuff we're talking about tonight. Now, that doesn't always get to happen, and Mick and I have been having great conversations lately about what products can we offer when you're not the network guy, like that, because that is kind of where I'm at with a lot of these security jobs. Is like they got a network, and they just want you to add cameras to it, and it's not as easy as it sounds. And then their network guy really doesn't want to deal with you. I'm running into that right now at this one job. But then they don't do cameras. So they want the customer ultimately wants cameras, and then their network guy is like, yeah, but I don't do cameras. And then they don't want to work with you. And it's like, at the end of the day, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
None of this is easy.
No, I mean, I've had the same scenario. I've had customers where we have a network guy, we don't want you to deal with network, we just want you to supply cameras. And I've come to the point where I go to, like, who's your network guy? I get the contact, and I say, how do you want to do the segmentation? Do you want to give me a VLAN? Do you want me to have a separate WAN connection that's totally isolated physically, whatnot? And they're kind of like crickets. I'm like, I'm talking the same language as you, and it's still crickets. And it's just like, I don't know how to make this progress, this project be a success, because I'm getting pushback from your own resource.
Right.
Yeah, and that's an important point, because I think you want to do that, right? You want to talk to their network staff, because as soon as you get into a place and you realize either they have their own MSP or they have in-house staff, that's the next conversation, right? I put it in all my proposals. There's X number of time spent we're going to have to deal with your network staff, and if that means chargeable hours for you, hey, I mean, this is something we need to do. This is a bridge that we have to cross.
Yeah.
Because I'm not just going to throw it up there. I'm not just going to leave you exposed. I mean, anybody that's already paying an MSP in there, I would think you already are concerned with any vulnerabilities, and you're taking this seriously. So I'm not going to be the guy. I'm not going to be the weak link in this chain, right? I'm not introducing this vulnerability. It's going to be somebody else. It's not going to be me.
100%.
Never a weak link in your chain.
I feel left to here, fellows.
But it's so true, and it's like funny because I can't. It's shocking to me how many network guys aren't camera guys, and it's like you kind of are killing yourself if you don't enter that arena. Like, oh, I'm just a network guy. I only program switches. I don't like to get on ladders or none of that stuff. And it's like, I mean, at some point in time, these network only companies have to bring in a camera guy. And Ray and I have had conversations about this all the time, because Ray doesn't do cameras. So like, I'm like, but what do you do when one of your customers wants cameras? And then he goes through and he has a trusted source, but they have to be like, on the same page, buddy. And, that doesn't happen when we get a cold call and like, hey, we want you to do cameras. Oh, by the way, our network guy, he doesn't mess around like that. And it's like, it just makes it more complicated than it needs to be,
I will say this, right? There's been a lot of IT companies at least in my area, who just decided, hey, I'm going to, like you said, I'm just going to do cameras. And I would say that the quality of those installs are not that good. Not on the networking side, the camera side, right? Doing cameras well is a skill, right? I know people will say, oh, it's not. I screw it into the wall. It looks good.
Yeah, I mean, everything, even hanging a TV is a skill. There are guys who can put an expert level TV mounting together. I mean, there's just good, better, best. Always. Everything. Ice cream, everything's good, better, best. There's always a middle ground, a high ground, and a low.
I mean, I've
And
had good luck with partnering with MSPs, right?
Mm.
yeah,
Because those guys are extremely comfortable with a keyboard in their hand,
Yes.
right? And then when it comes to like, hey, this guy asked for a new AP. Okay, I'm calling him. This guy wants camera system. I don't do camera system. I'm calling him. Or this
Yeah.
guy wants access control now. Because they usually use the MSP as like the ask everything, right? Oh, I want
Yeah.
this. Do you do that? And the answer is usually no. But then
Yep.
if you partner correctly, right, meet these MSPs, get familiar with them, you know, get to a point where you can work with them and they respect you. Because a lot of the MSPs, I start getting on the phone. I'm not even that good, but I start talking VLANs and segregation and everything, and they're like, oh,
You know your stuff.
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
No.
So
Yeah.
they start to respect it, and that's a good relationship. That turns into business, right? Because they refer their clients to you because
Right.
you're that guy.
Yeah. No, I was
They
gonna.
don't want to get on the ladder.
Yeah, I was going to say what Jeff said too. Is I've seen MSPs where they want to do wireless, for example, but they don't climb a ladder. They don't even want to
Right.
climb a ladder, put an AP on a cable hanging on the ceiling. They outsource it all. And you go on site to do a lot of a validation survey. You're like, who the heck did they pay to do this? Like everything looks like garbage, and that's happened with cameras
Yeah,
too. Is people don't want to do cameras, they find someone
Right.
that will do it, and it's just a disaster.
I'll do you one better. So obviously, I'm got a lot of education clients. My background's in tech ed, and you get into that public school sector, and like those contracts are insane.
Mhm.
Like, I've been able to really come through and bridge that gap between the technology department and the maintenance. The maintenance guys, because the maintenance guys in their contract, they're not allowed to touch technology stuff, but they're the only people on the school grounds that are allowed to climb anything higher than 6 feet. It's this bananas relationship there, where like the tech people have in their contract can't lift more than 50 pounds, can't climb anything taller than 6 feet in the air. And then the maintenance guys are the ones who are allowed to climb 12 feet in the air to change the light bulbs in the gym or something like that. But they're not allowed to touch any of the technology gear. So they bring in a company like mine who, like, we can climb anything, we can touch anything, we can do whatever we need to do. But it's just another chef in the kitchen,
Yeah.
So kind of to make the point, it's like you got to get in good with those providers, because for whatever reason, they don't do what you do, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Oh.
There's
Yeah.
there's
Let's-
a job for everybody.
Yeah. Let's get back to the topic. I have a couple of questions that I wanted to pose to Rob and
Okay.
see what his take would be on it. So what happens when you get onto an install and say you've got more than 255 devices to drop, right?
Yep.
I know everybody, likes to do their 24/8, right?
Yep.
So what would you do?
I mean, there's different ways to definitely approach it. I mean, you could either, depending on the install, you either do a bigger subnet, so a /23, which is double a /24, so almost 500 IPs there. They're usable. I mean, you can also segment your network, so you could have camera network building 1, camera network building 2, and you have a managed router that can transit that traffic between networks back to your VLAN with your NVR on it or VMS solution on it. I mean, there's definitely a lot of solutions. I mean, I think a lot of these camera vendors are, the way they publish their documents, everything's a /24, nothing else exists. Which, I mean, I've had camera networks in smaller businesses where it's a /28 network because it's 3 cameras, 4 cameras. Why would I waste a whole block of 250 IPs when I only need 6 IPs? So, I mean, that comes down to very much basic networking skill set of knowing your subnetting, knowing your basic routing. Because I'm sure you see a lot, especially in education. You have a multi-campus building. You're not going to have one camera network across 7 buildings. Each building might have its own camera network, but it can talk back to your NVR in your data center or whatnot.
Yeah, those are fringe cases, and I guess for me, 255 is usually more than enough.
Yeah, so it's 254 because, or sorry, it's actually 283 because your dot one is your dot. Let's say your dot one is your gateway, and then your 255 is your broadcast. So that leaves you 253 usable.
253.
Yeah.
Got it. So, there aren't that many 200 plus installs around, at least in my sector, right? So I like to, as a rule of thumb, like I'll block 100, and these would be the access devices, and then 100 to 200, those are the cameras.
Yeah.
So you can quickly kind of get an idea of what kind of devices you have and what's on there.
No, I agree.
And another thing, yep, go ahead.
I was going to say, like I said, only time you're going to have that many devices. I'm trying to think what scenario, like even a large enterprise office building. When you think of office building, they have a camera at exit doors, some security, whatnot. That's still a lot of cameras to cover. I mean, I think only time you get 200 plus cameras in a building might be at some place like a high security place, like a prison or something like that, for example. I mean,
casino,
prison. I mean, healthcare maybe if it's a hospital, ER room where it's a neighborhood of problems and there's crime happening in the waiting room. They need that. I mean, you got to think of 250 devices is a lot of devices. I mean, I think if you have a network that big, there's probably a part of the project involved network design. I would hope you're not just someone doesn't call you saying, "Hey, Mick, I want 300 cameras. Just do it."
Yeah.
And there's no. I mean, at that point, a budget that big, you would hope there's a network design aspect of that budget.
Absolutely. So another thing, if you don't control the network, and I've been bit by this one, right? So cameras, we static IP cameras. Some of the new access control systems, you don't really have to static IP them anymore because they usually just talk out, and we'll get to that too. What kind of cloud, firewall, that kind of thing. But I've had somebody, and for some reason, somebody's desk phone got themselves onto the security VLAN, took up the IP of one of my cameras, and just completely dropped that camera intermittently, right? So this is one of the worst problems I have, when it intermittently gets in the way. So you get on there, you IP scan it, you see your camera, but you go ahead and you try to ping it, and it's like you're getting mixed responses and all kinds of stuff. So that's another reason why you don't want to share.
Yes.
You don't want to share, right? Even if the client is telling you, "Oh, well, I don't think a VLAN is necessary," they have to guarantee you that nobody will have an IP conflict, and they can't do that.
No,
they really can't do that.
No, and I've seen a lot. I'm sure you've seen too. A lot of these clients, they'll have MSPs that are budget MSPs, and they pretty much have level 1 techs making decisions that should be made by level 3 techs. And this is what happens is a level 1 tech that doesn't know what he's doing will change a VLAN on a desk port to a VLAN to be on the same VLAN as your security, which should have never happened, but it does. And because you don't control the network, you're trying to play troubleshooting, but you don't have an overview of the network to see what's going on. If you had access to the network to see what's going on, you probably troubleshoot it in 5-10 minutes, 20 minutes max. But because you're dealing with MSP, that you're kind of playing messenger back and forth. Well, can you check this? Can you check that? Can you check that? And I mean, that's where I see the pain point where people don't want to share any resources because they don't trust each other. Which, I mean, it happens. Unfortunately, there's bad MSPs out there, right? I mean, there's MSPs that, well, how cheap can we service the customer, and how cheap can we hire staff, which results in poor experience for the customer themselves, plus vendors that are doing security, like you and Jeff and whatnot. And it's costing more money than it's worth versus just selling them a separate network. I mean, I've seen a lot too where some vendors come in and the MSP says, "We don't want to play with you, go away, bye-bye." And now the customer's paying for a separate internet connection, a separate router, a separate switch. They have a whole separate network stack just for cameras. And you think of some of these internet connections, a business cable connection is $100+ a month.
Yep.
I mean, so now they've literally spent double on their IT budget for a camera network that could have been part of their existing network, that MSP knew how to play with other vendors.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you said, we all said, you see a lot. Sometimes MSPs are, it's our network. You're not touching it.
Yeah,
Mick,
they can
what's
get
the
very
biggest
territorial.
camera? What's the biggest camera job you've ever done, Mick?
So I would say it was probably 88,
Okay.
88, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've been involved in other projects, but it wasn't exactly ours. I mean, over
Sure.
here, so I'm in Washington, Baltimore, that area, right? So there's a ton of
Federal jobs and
federal, governmental. So,
Yeah.
I mean, one of those places, I think it was 525 cameras.
And
They
you
were
helped
putting
out.
up. Yeah, but like I said, it wasn't mine. You know,
you're
Right.
you're
So
just
the eight-
but labor.
Yeah. So the 80 camera job, that was yours. Obviously, was the network yours?
no.
Okay.
No, but I had a very good relationship with the MSP, and
Yeah.
they were good. I had a good experience with them. We got on the phone. We had an introductory call. We were talking the same language.
Yeah.
So it was just a matter of when I get devices online, I give them a call. They make sure it goes on the VLAN. They were pretty responsive. I mean, I actually had them like cell phone numbers. So we got
Okay.
cameras up. We called them up. 5 minutes later, I could see it on the client, and
Okay.
we were rocking and rolling. Especially, and then a lot of times. So another thing that we started to do was for Meraki had stock issues, right? They were a Meraki shop, so we
Okay.
brought the switches, right? So I said, hey, I'm going to bring a switch. I brought UI, and
Yep.
I'm going to plug it into this port, and you trunk the port to go directly to the VLAN. So it made it a little bit easier. So basically, I labeled that switch or whatever, and I said, this is security only. So don't plug anything in here. And it worked out. They didn't plug anything into it. I labeled it well, and my patch panel going straight into the switch. So it would have been a little inconvenient for them to plug into my switch, being that their patch was all the way up at the top or something.
Okay.
And it would have been so obvious, you know what I mean? Because I have all the nice little neat
Yeah.
ones, and then there's this like 6-footer coming to the floor, back up again, into port 23. We would have seen that one fast.
And you have that advantage because you installed that switch. You can manage it. So you can start doing things like disabling ports that aren't used. So that doesn't happen.
Yes, I actually had it set in form to my own cloud hosted
Yeah.
controller, so
Okay.
that worked out well. And I think I want to do more of that. I mean, from my experience, I enjoy owning the network, at least having a hand in the network. That type of experience, because we spend far too much time diagnosing issues that should have been avoided.
Yes.
And that's what I find, like, if you're not managing the cameras, like, I know people always say, get people on the maintenance contract, get people on the maintenance contract. And that's really hard to do if you're not managing the cameras from a network side. Because it's like, okay, maintenance to do what? To go out there and clean them once a year, make sure the storage is up and down. Like, people are like, they're not really biting. They're not buying that. But if you're managing the network side of it, that's a whole different ball game. I mean, honestly, I avoided it because I'm like, I'm not an MSP. I don't want to be an MSP. That's just hard work and it's a lot of time. But at the same time, it's better for the client because if I'm in charge of the security devices, network-wise, I can help you more. And I bring
Right.
more value to the equation because I can get on there and say, okay, here's your problem. This device that I'm about to boot off got plugged in and, dropped my camera with the same IP conflict. So, that kind of thing. I can solve those problems, preemptively, or even shut off all those ports and not even entertain it, right? I know what's there. I'm in charge. I know what should be there, and I know what kind of traffic it should be doing. Plus the idea of, power cycling a camera, that's so important. Like, even if I had to tell you, even if you had IT staff on site, I'd have to spend a lot of time walking you through exactly where that camera's plugged in. Like, I got to have all that data in front of me.
Right.
And I noticed that I'm managing massive amounts. I'm managing IP addresses, which patch, the labeling on it, which port in the patch panel it is, which port it gets plugged into in the switch, just so I can talk to the MSP about it. Because when I have to talk to the MSP, I got to say, okay, that camera is plugged in.
Port 23.
B23, and then it's plugged into your switch in port 23, right? And then I got to tell them which switch is plugged into. So I literally have spreadsheets that correlate, patch panel, switch, which VLAN, which room that thing is plugged into for every camera, for every access control panel.
Yeah.
And I don't like having to manage all that, right? Because
I mean, so I was going to say too, I've seen it both ends. So I used to work for a national food distributor back in my younger days, and we had a camera vendor come in to install cameras in this warehouse, and they wanted to, they're very much a security integrator. They wanted to sell, the company's standard was Milestone, but they wanted to sell, I think it was Raspberry, that do like the Edge VMS for Milestone.
Yeah.
They wanted to put one of these in every network cabinet. There'd be like 6 cameras and one MDF, 6 cameras, another IDF, 6 cameras, another IDF, because it's a big, massive food warehouse with APs and wireless and other network devices everywhere. But they wanted to put their own hardware in. We're like, no, we have a whole like corporate network standard backbone, everything's redundant, whatnot. You can plug in your own network, and they push back on it for sure, because they were very set in the way that this is the way we sell a camera system. We don't sell anything else. But trying to sell a billion-dollar company your solution that costs more money, they're going to say no. And so I see in both ends. I mean, we end up working out with them that tell us your requirements. We'll make sure you're set. But the one whereas we were doing this at just got a whole network refresh. So it had dual 10 gig backbones between switches, dual cores, dual everything. It was way more redundant than anything we were ever going to be. And we designed it that they were kind of shocked with this. Is we designed it saying, hey, we want cameras that are alternating views to be on separate switches. So when you do your patch panels, if one camera is here in a warehouse and one camera is here in a warehouse, we want these to be on separate switches. So if one switch goes down, we still have a view of that area.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, Mick. So that job that was 80 cameras, that was split over 2 switches.
Oh no, it's split over. It was actually 5 different.
All right, because they didn't come back to the same closet. Okay.
No. The space was huge, so we had like 5 different IDFs all across the building. So
okay,
I guess it was 5 different switches. I don't think any of the rooms had more than 24 cameras plugged in.
Okay, so it's very much like when I design wireless to be redundant. I don't put all my APs on one switch. I'll put 2 APs on one switch, 2 APs on another switch. So if I lose a switch, I only lose 2-3 APs, and they're limited functionality, but they're still functioning. And the same with cameras.
And the same thing with cameras, right? So when you get into this design element with the customer, and you're like, hey, to really, I mean, you're talking everything. Like, you should have battery backups, you should have this, you should have that. And then you start saying, hey, we should really kind of load balance these switches, and then have, like, the cameras, like, if you got them cross, capturing the same spot, one's on one switch, one's on the other switch. And then, they just get, I don't need that. I'm like,
well, then a switch goes down, and they're like, I've lost. Yeah. I didn't record in this area for 12 hours, and something happened. You're like, well, I can't make video if it didn't get recorded. Sorry.
Yeah, and I like the idea, but it you gotta get buy-in from it, right?
Yes.
Because if I were to do that, I would have doubled. I would have been over probably 10, 11 switches.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a lot easier to do if it all comes back to the same closet. But if you need 80 cameras, the odds are you're not covering just one closet. You're probably at a big location.
I mean, that's what I thought too. Is 80 plus cameras. You probably got a building that size. You probably got 300 plus desk ports alone, plus wireless access ports and whatnot. I mean, they probably have a massive network stack. I mean, 5 or 6 cameras a switch is nothing, and a lot of vendors. I mean, we see it all the time. Customers say, "This is the 10 ports we gave you each switch." Well, can you give me 2 ports on each switch instead of one block of 10 ports? Like bandwidth, it's not even this redundancy. It's bandwidth considerations, right? I mean, especially now, I mean, H265 definitely helps with that. But if you have 25 cameras on one 48-port switch that are 24/7 recording, I mean, your bandwidth can get up there. I mean,
Yeah, it's a lot of juice.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for us, we had fiber between every IDF.
Yep.
So, I mean, it was just like they had a pretty sophisticated network.
Okay.
Like, I didn't have to go in there and teach them how to do anything. They were
already
ready.
planned,
I mean,
prepared for that.
Yeah. They had a 10G backbone. They had, fiber between the rooms. So they had what we needed.
Okay.
It's just, like I said, to tell them they need to buy, 5 extra 48-port switches,
Yeah.
they were going to probably not like it.
No,
But it's just another physical component that strengthens this security system.
I don't disagree at all. You're 100% right. Does it make it a better, more resilient solution? 100%. It's like the battery backup fight.
yeah.
I'm
Yep.
telling everybody, you got to got battery backup. And then they give me one battery in a room with, this rack has, 3 servers, 4 switches.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, this will last a whole 39 seconds
Yeah,
before it's depleted.
thanks for giving me time to log in.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's even, I see that taught even residential. You got higher residential, and they have a generator. Oh, I have a generator. I don't need a battery backup. Well, your camera system is still going to drop offline hard when your power goes out before the generator starts off, and then when you switch back to grid power, it's going to drop again. And so I understand you have a generator. I'm like, what's the start time of the generator? Oh, like 2-3 minutes. Okay, so let's plan for 10 minutes runtime on the UPS.
Right.
That way,
Yeah.
after a year, when the battery's degraded a little bit, you still got some runtime for to handle generator startup and switch over to generator power and switch back to the grid power. And they get offended. Well, I spent $100,000 on a generator for my whole house. I don't need a battery backup.
Right.
Yeah. And like I said, it's not their problem, but everybody's conscious of what they're spending, right? Even big clients, I've gone into, do athletes, pro athletes,
Okay.
and I'll tell you what, you think it's like that, and then they're pinching pennies with you, and it's like, this isn't what I expected.
No.
But
Yeah, I saw that contract you inked. Don't give me that. And I want to talk about the generator thing because I had something actually happen to me on Christmas Eve. One of my cannabis sites, they had a backup generator, and I think I told you guys the story about how the network the whole network, including the battery backup, were plugged into a GFI because it was next to a cement wall. So the generator, they had a bad storm. Generator kicked on. It tripped the GFI. My battery backup lasted 2 hours. It did its job, but when the generator came back, when everything happened, everything came back on. That GFI was tripped, and you could have the best battery backup in the world. You could have a generator, a whole house generator, and then just a stupid thing like a GFI being tripped. Took this whole place down until I was able to get over there and just go boop, and then that's a whole nother story. But when we talk about the elements to a security system, it's basic stuff like that. Like, don't have your stuff plugged into a GFI that could pop, and then if you have the battery backup there, your stuff's being protected. And then, if the generator were to kick back on, at least that GFI didn't trip, and your stuff can continue to work. But so it's all these little experiences that guys like us can take from job to job and say, if you want this thing flawless, I can talk to you about all the things I've seen that will help this be the best it can be.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely a game of risk assessment. It's like I've been doing this 20 years. You have network risk, you have power risk, you have this risk, you have that risk. If your security is that important, let me design this for you correctly. No, just give me cameras. I don't care about the rest.
Yeah.
Well, what good are your cameras if they don't have power, they're not recording because they don't have network access?
And the thing, like I just suggested, that's a $5 fix. You know what I mean? But it's just like, doesn't want to hear it.
No.
So.
You live and you learn, right? And that's what everybody wants to think that they can do that job or do somebody else's job, but it's like experience means something.
Yeah,
right?
You're right.
Experience means something. I was watching something, some little clip video, and it was like, the experience, the beginner does it so many times until they get it right, and then the experienced person does it so many times that they can't get it wrong.
Can't get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
yeah,
that's,
I do.
I felt that because, that's where you want to be at. You want to be where this stuff is instinctual. You're looking at it, you're finding the flaws, and you're designing a system. And I'll tell you what, like we were talking about before, somebody comes to you and is like, hey, I got some stuff. I just want you to install it. It's like, no, thank you.
No.
I mean, not that business is bad, but it's like, I like the design.
Yeah.
The design is fun. The install, it can be fun, but it's nothing like the design, right? It's nothing like that creativeness of saying, I got this for you.
And when you just do the install, it's something not is working to your expectations. The customer goes back and blame you. Like, I didn't design this. I just installed what was provided to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And
right. It's like, yeah.
It's finger pointing. Well, you're the last one that touched it, so it's your fault. And it's like, well, I can't control what you gave me. No, and I'm definitely at the same point. I'm at the point where I enjoy speccing hardware that I know is reliable, it's redundant. I mean, I got a small Canvas customer my way, and I will install UPSs with network cards in them, PDUs with network cards, and I'll monitor things. Power goes out, it's sending me an email, the owner an email, their store manager an email, like, hey, the power went out. Like, if you know, that's cool. This is a heads up. But I also monitor things. I monitor power draw on certain ports. So if my DVR port power draw goes down to nothing on that port, it triggers an alert and sends an email, hey, the power draw on this port's nothing anymore. And most of the time I get that alert before even I got alert the NVR went offline. And they're like, why am I spending $2,000 on power protection equipment? It's going to save your butt one day. And it has. They had a store that had a power outage from a storm, and they were all on holidays, and the only person around it was a holiday weekend, so they closed on like the Saturday early, and they were closed the Sunday. They'd open until later on Monday because it was a holiday that Monday. And if I didn't tell them the power was out, they would have not known until they got the DVR was offline, which means time they got there, because the owner lives a couple hours away, they potentially had 2 hours, 3 hours with no recording, which breaks all Canvas regulations.
Yeah.
Yep.
That would suck. So I hope everybody who heard this podcast learned a little something at least. And if you're keeping up with us, we record the podcast, we release it, and I would say in about 2 weeks, we do an IG Live, and it'll broadcast from the Techknowledge WW page. And you can tune in and, give your feedback to us, ask us questions. It's going to be a live session, usually lasts about an hour. And I'd like to thank our panel. Rob, where can people find you?
Instagram, Redefined Solutions. When I'm home, I'm in Toronto area, but we all know that's not that often. I saw Jeff not even 12 hours ago. Just west of Boston where we were. I'm here at Ray's house hanging for 2 days in Philly, and then I go home on Saturday. But yeah, that's where. And Instagram's usually the best place to find me.
Next trip, Africa.
Yes, we'll talk about that.
And then Jeff Day, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm at Better Days Tech on Instagram, and thank you very much, Mick. Always a pleasure to be here. I think it's you said something earlier. It's like we enjoy this, and it's like we enjoy the design. And like I heard both of you say, I enjoy this, and I think that's the part that we need to get to our customers is like, we're not in this to be in your wallet. We really do enjoy this.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll wrap this one up.
All right, have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Okay.